significant ways, we are still learning and still a long way from properly understanding our enemy, as it were. Nick Loman is on the line, who's Professor of Microbial Genomics and Bioinformatics at the University of Birmingham. Morning to you.
Morning.
Tell us about the work that you've been involved in and what we know, I suppose initially, about whether we are dealing with one virus or many now.
Okay, so I'm come to talk about our COG consortium. The UK really has been pioneers in the development of genome technology and sequencing, and we came together in mid-March to bring together academic and research institutes with the NHS and the public health agencies to try and ensure that we had a really good view of the virus genome. How is SARS-CoV-2 evolving, and whether that information can tell us anything about epidemiology and help us guide epidemiological investigations. And you've asked a question about strains. I'd like to put out my first answer, which is that, to an approximation, there is only one strain of this virus. And what we found out early on, after the first clusters of cases in China, is that this is it's a nasty virus. It's highly transmissible, and it has high pathogenic potential.
Right, can I just interrupt you there? Because that is itself fascinating, because what you read, and in some quite responsible reporting around the world, is that actually there are other strains, and possibly strains that are quicker to transmit than the original one. Are you saying that isn't true, or isn't a big problem?
So just unpack that a bit. So the important thing to know is that everything that we see circulating in the UK and worldwide has a very recent common ancestor. We date that using genomics actually back to late November and early December, consistent with the first cases. And when we look at genomes, we see mutations, we see evolution, and that's exactly what we expect to see. It's quite interesting that viruses evolve actually at quite a predictable rate. We see about 2 mistakes a month being made in SARS-CoV-2. So the first thing to say is that we expect mutations all the time. Now, every time you see a new mutation, that doesn't mean you have a new strain. If you see that some strains or some types share mutations, we put those into lineages, but we don't therefore call it a new strain. But right. You're alluding to an interesting paper that does determine that there is a single mutation that seems to be increasing in frequency in the population. And certainly in the UK, we're also seeing that.
And am I right then to say that that leads to it being not necessarily a more serious potential illness that it leads to, but something that is transmitted more easily than the original one was?
Well, so that's the claim. The claim is that this is potentially a more transmissible strain. But I think that the standard of evidence to say that it's more transmissible has not been met. It's actually a very interesting finding. But most of the findings are based on trying to understand how that mutation might change the structure of a protein called spike, a really important protein for infecting human cells. And the computational modeling is quite persuasive that it will have a difference. But that's very, very different to saying that there's going to be a big change in transmissibility or virulence. We assume that that's not actually the case.
If it affects that spike, does that then affect the ability of the various companies that are trying to create a vaccine to be successful?
I think so. It's way too early to say anything about whether this would affect vaccine development. But I would guess not. As I say, we actually expect small numbers of mutations to occur in the virus, and so this is not an unexpected finding. So in our data set from our consortium, we're starting to look, we've got a really interesting natural experiment going on. We can see these lineages, we can see the changes of the frequencies, and we can also look at things like how long is that lineage lasting? Does one mutation seem to outcompete another? And so far, we're not really seeing that. More analysis, more data is required, but we're not really seeing evidence in the population that this is going to be super important.
We are out of time for the moment, but that was absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for talking to us, and do come back and let's talk to you regularly, and if we may, about what's going on, because plainly it is a moving picture. Nick Loman, Professor Nick Loman from Birmingham University. Thank you.
20 to 9 now.